Good evening to everybody, and welcome to the next part of our 24-hour extraordinary webinar. So I should say good evening. I should say to all our friends in Europe. I should say good morning and good afternoon to everyone in the US and Mexico. And I should say good night and sleep tight to all our previous attendees and speakers who are in Asia. So we are effectively halfway through this webinar. We still have another 12 hours to go. We started this morning UK time at 6 o'clock in the morning with my friend and colleague Nick Foley, who was speaking to us from Sydney, and we've passed through various locations to arrive in London. After this, we then leave Europe and move over to the US and Mexico, where there will be a further 11 or 12 presentations that will take us right through to well into tonight and tomorrow morning. So I hope you're enjoying it. I'd like to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes, if I can, just sharing with you some thoughts that we've been having about some topics, I suppose, to do with how consumer and brands and retail behavior is changing. This entire webinar has been set up to really try and share with you our views on brand experience, and importantly, how we as designers and creative thinkers, how we are approaching it and thinking about what we might need to do. So let me just first share my screen with you. Okay, so the essence of my conversation is a topic we've been thinking about, as I said a second ago, before I got distracted trying to set up my screen, that we are calling new essentials, the future of meaningful experiences. And part of the reason for that is I think that over the last 18 months, maybe longer, and certainly in the last 8 to 6 weeks, we have been asked several times, many times, by our clients, leading brands, leading retailers that we're working with at Landor&FITCH, two very key questions that I think are pertinent and are the top of everybody's mind at the moment, which is, how is consumer behavior changing? Always a very interesting topic, and I think at Landor&FITCH, we spent a lot of time looking at social cultural change, because that is the essence of being able to create great design solutions. But then the second being more pertinent, I think, again at the top of people's minds, is what is the future of physical retail? Some people even say, is there a future of physical retail? Well, I think there is. But I think, as you can imagine, it is changing, as many things are changing, and as these recent weeks have maybe heightened that and brought that more to the fore of our thinking. So I want, if I can, spend this time just talking to you about this idea of what we're calling the new essential. You know, we've been in a period of restriction. We've been in a period where we can't necessarily behave in ways we've behaved before, and that can be a good thing, and that can be at times a bad thing. But I think we've all started to question what we see as essential, what we want from the brands that we choose to spend time with, what we want from the times that we spend with our family and our friends. And so in essence, what we're saying is that, to get right into it right away, is to say that we think that shopping is going, as a result, to become, and has been over the last few years, has become maybe a more considerate and a more considered experience. We believe, and we've said this for a number of years, that consumers are becoming less about what I can buy from you and more about what I can achieve with you. I still want to buy things from you, but ultimately I want this to be something that allows me to achieve my goals for myself, my family, and for my society. And so personal enrichment is, we think, going to become an even bigger trend over the next few months and years. And in order to deliver that, we believe that brands, retailers, will need to start displaying, as will the general public, more generosity and more of a sense of companionship. I love that word. The idea where I see you as, of course, somebody with whom I trade, but I also see you as my companion, somebody who is really thinking about what I need from the world today. So ultimately, we're asking the question that, how will essential, going forward, define future brand and purchase decisions? If you think about it, there have been a number of, and this is some topics we've talked about many times, some significant game-changing moments throughout the centuries and the years. There have been people who have been game changers. And there's a few examples at the top of the screen, from Jeff Bezos with Amazon to somebody like Pablo Picasso or Gandhi. I won't go through them all. You can see them there. There have been amazing products that have changed the game, whether it's the tin can or the printing press or the Singer sewing machine that allowed people to make en masse clothes for the mass population. And there have been events that have been game changing. And I think clearly at the moment we are all wondering to what extent this has been a game changing event. But I would say that the biggest game changers is society itself. And if you think about the wonderful generations that have gone before us, whether it be at the turn of the century, the 20th century, the greatest generation, through the silent, the baby boomers, Generation X and Generation Y, they've all in their own way, they have been game changing in terms of the things they've asked for, the things they've expected, the things they've demonstrated about, and the way in which we as retailers, brands and designers, creative people, have really listened to what they've been saying and understanding the nuance of how those particular audiences have changed. And today we're with Gen Z. We've done a lot of research over the years into Gen Z for a number of our clients. And one of the things that we found was this: if anybody has a teenage son or daughter, you will probably think of them as being in a constant state of partial attention. You're talking to them, they're not looking at you, but they are actually listening and they are paying attention. In fact, we would go as far to say that these people are paying complete attention, probably now more than ever. What you might start to think about them is generation post-pandemic, the coronials, as it is termed, the hashtag quarantines. This is going to be a very major period of time for them. They are going to be a big cohort of our future consumers, our future employees. They are hashtagging stay safe. They're hashtagging clap for carers all over the world. They're hashtagging quarantine and chill. It's replaced Netflix and chill. And they're also hashtagging COVIDiots. They are annoyed when they see that people are not contributing in the way that they would want people to contribute to this universal thing that we're all going through. So I think that generation post-pandemic, and something that you will hear later from a colleague of ours, Michelle Fenstermaker, who's going to be talking about how maybe the traditional divisions between generations may actually be coming together. And she's going to talk about that later. But also, a really good friend of mine and colleague, Thomas O'Dowell, will be speaking straight after me about how brands need to become more resilient and what they need to do to be resilient, which is not about fighting against off all difficult things that are happening, but more understanding the people you're talking to and the manner in which you do that. But we think there is a new spirit of customer experience. And again, one of the things that Fitch and Landor&FITCH have been looking at over the last 5 to 6 years is this idea of generous brands, how you really display, wear your heart on your sleeve in terms of how you talk to your consumers. And I think it has shifted from being a generosity of things, buy one, get one free, 2 for 1, the usual kind of promotions, to a generosity of experience where I'm having a great time with you and you're giving me a great experience. And I wonder, one of the things, our contention these days is whether we're moving to more now a behaviour which is a generosity of behaviour. We spent some time looking at the word and the concept of generosity, and it started pre-17th century as coming from the word genus. And generosity was in those days associated with your birth. So the quality of your birth, the nobility of your birth. So generosity was not really necessarily attached to your behaviour, but more to your standing in society. It was only after the 17th century that it became less about your nobility of birth and more about your nobility of spirit. This wonderful word, largesse, the virtue of giving good things to others freely and abundantly. And I think we've seen examples of that in these last few weeks. And I think if you think all the way back to when Chris Anderson wrote Freetail, the former editor of Wired magazine, and the idea that we've started to expect things that are abundant and free as a reward for our custom and for our loyalty to brands. Forgive me. So the nobility was about gallantry, courage, strength. And what it was a rejection of selfishness, greed, fear and meanness. And I think that we've seen great demonstrations of that in the last few weeks. However, are we as human beings wired to be generous? And it's interesting when you look at that. Nicole Torres wrote a great Harvard Business Review piece in 2015 about what generous brains do differently. And when you look at the brain, there are there's many aspects of the brain. Two I want to focus on right now is the ventral striatum, which is, you can see where it's pointed out there on the little diagram. And that is the part of the brain that really is about the survival of the fittest. It is that survival instinct. It's about how much things benefit me. The temporoparietal junction, however, is more community-minded. It's more about how much this benefits you. And I think that really when you think about this idea of giving freely and abundantly to others, that isn't often the mindset when you are trying to beat your competitors, when you're trying to beat your nearest neighbor in a retail park, etc. It's all about how I can, but we have to think now about how an emerging mindset, an emerging consumer behavior in various formats, whether it's online or in the physical nature, how you start to become that companion and that generous friend for those customers and audiences. It'll come as no shock, but the temporoparietal junction is the least developed part of our brain. It is the bit that is associated with empathy and thinking of others. But interesting, over the last few weeks, and I'm sorry to keep talking about it, but we're seeing all over the world natural, very instinctive demonstrations of appreciation for others, our neighbors, care workers, friends, our colleagues, relations. And so it's interesting. Will this be a piece of learned behavior that will stay with us? I don't have a crystal ball, but I think that there will certainly be something that will be a residue of this that will live with us for quite a long time. So this leads us on to our next point, really, which is the rise of considerate and considered consumers. Let's take the considerate side. Before all this happened, much was being spoken of about what we were doing to our environment. And we were being asked to be very considerate about our environment. We were also being challenged by, were we being considerate enough to our fellow man? I'm sorry to do such a specific reference, but if you think about the UK 8 months ago, almost seems like a distant memory now, but this was possibly one of the most divided countries ever in terms of there was 50% of the people who wanted to leave Europe, 50% of the people who wanted to stay, and there was increasing animosity between those people. Whereas I wonder whether consideration now and being considerate is that we are all starting to see the fact that during this period of restriction, less flights, less factories producing pollution, that our skies have become bluer. That actually maybe we have become somewhat more empathetic to our fellow man, as I've already described, the rise of Zoom, the rise of chatting to friends who we can't be with, but who we spend maybe quite a bit of interesting time playing quizzes, having drinks, having dinner even with them. Then on the other side, the idea of being more considered. Started this whole speech this talk starting about being essential. Now, essential before was how much I could manage to carry home from the shops. And the experience I was looking for was, what is the bargain I can get, a Black Friday deal? I kind of wince when I look at a picture like that now, not least because of what's going on, but also just the amount of people that are crammed into the same space. We may find through all this that actually we've become slightly different in what we believe is essential. And that actually this period of restriction has made us really question what is essential. The key will be how we as creatives, how we as brands and retailers start to reposition ourselves back onto that essential list, as opposed to this buy one, get one free list. And equally, the experience is going to be something that will need to be much more considered. And that is, I think, where design and creativity will come in to play very strongly in terms of people's concerns about hygiene, people's concerns about distance, which we've all had to get a lot more used to. As I said right at the beginning, really, because we're seeing this being a shift from what I can buy from you to what I can achieve with you. And this leads me on to this point that an experience in the future is going to be one that is about allowing me to enrich my life. And how do you contribute to that personal enrichment? Because, we spend a lot of time, as you would expect, talking about experience. It's one of our favorite subjects. Unfortunately, it's become one of everybody's favorite subjects. It's probably the most overused term in the last 16, 15 years. It's become the biggest topic really that people are talking about. And I think we really need to understand what is the dynamics of an experience. And you may have heard Morgan talking an hour or so ago about how we look at experience themes and how we started to codify experience. But we very firmly believe in how brands need to create an experience signature, which is made up of PhD. It is the physical, the immediate, the immersive, the tactile. It clearly is the digital. It's infinite, it's interactive, it's all about endless and dynamic storytelling. But in the middle, I think, is something that's often overlooked and something that we care passionate about, whether it is digital or whether it is physical, which is the human, where we're seeing empathy. We're seeing brands that are more approachable, even kind, even just that's a lovely word, not often used, that these brands are kind. Because you ask yourself, is this an experience? Well, of course it is. It's a wonderful experience. It's things that people save up all their hard-earned cash to go and do. Again, I look at this image, and I don't know about you, but people look like they're having a great time, but it's kind of a rather interesting image now to see with all those people in such close proximity. But we'll move on because I'm sure we will get back to that in some way, shape or form. Is this an experience? It's a wonderful human experience where these people are the masters of their craft. These are the guys that work in Starbucks Reserve. They know everything that there is to know about this particular way of making coffee, and they will talk to you about it. They will stand shoulder to shoulder with you and talk till the cows come home about their particular passion and their excitement. And nothing can replace that type of enthusiasm and passion. But then also, is this an experience? Well, of course it is. It's a wonderful experience for many, many people, whether it's shopping on my laptop, my tablet, or on my smartphone. And I think that over the last few weeks and months, we've all become maybe, probably without realizing, much more attuned and considerate and considered of how we shop online. And so that is going to become an ever increasing trend, we think, but that doesn't mean that physical retail is going away. What I wanted to share with you was a piece of work that was done for SingTel. Now, I'm not suggesting this is the ultimate answer, but it's an interesting insight into how you could equally create a unmanned store. We think this is the future of a PhD, physical, human, digital experience. It's called SingTel Unboxed. It's a space where there's security control. I suspect in the future there will be, as they're starting to do in airports, you may be able to scan people to make sure that they haven't got a temperature. So you will, when you're in there, you will feel safe. You can speak to a member of staff. You can pick up a new product. You can demonstrate a new product. And importantly, it is a piece of real estate that you can put anywhere, which is an interesting thought that when, after all this is over, where will people want to be? And will you as a brand be able to show up in that place and give them a wonderful experience? Because I think people will want to be in different places than they were before all this happened. So as I say, you can look at new products. This was obviously SingTel, but also you can have a really good conversation with a member of staff. Let me show you a quick film. So I show you that piece of work, not because I'm proud of it or that we'd like to show off about what we do, but hopefully because it'll help you maybe think about how joining some dots about what might be the role of physical retail. There'll still be stores, but there could start to be maybe unmanned stores, or where would your mind take this? We're even looking now at a flagship unmanned store, a two-story unmanned store. And the point being is that it's unmanned, but going back to what we've been saying all the way through this, it's not unhuman. It's the first, I think, of the next generation of physical online retail experiences. It is a component, in our view, of future format strategies to actually start to build that into a format strategy for a business. It clearly supports the needs, immediate needs, the convenience needs, the friction-free needs, and health concerns of future customers. It combines AI, facial recognition, biometrics, VoIP, voice over internet, as it were, etc., etc. And in a way, I think it blends perfectly PhD. So I think there is a healthy future for physical retail. It will clearly be different than it was before, both in terms of layout, but also in terms of the way that consumers and the new considerate and considered consumers who are looking to have their personal lives enriched and how they start to look for essential experiences going forward. So in summary, I would say, as I did at the beginning, that essential will increasingly define future brand and purchase decisions. Companionship and generosity will become desired behaviours, from me as an audience to you as a brand. And the question, I suppose, is how will we respond to this more considerate and considered and their mindset, and how will we and you establish yourself on their personal enrichment agenda? Because really what we're looking to do is create a meaningful partnership, a companionship between brands and consumers at all points on their experience of journey, from the moment they think about a product or a need, all the way through to several weeks, months after they've purchased it. So I would leave you with a thought to say, be essential, think about considerate, considered, and being a companion.